researcher, the first person to teach a college-level course on JFK, former Fort Worth Star-Telegram crime reporter, good friend of mine, great guy. He's going to be with us for the hour. But if Jesse calls in anytime in this hour or the next hour, when Watson's on with me, we'll go. We'll go into a holding pattern with the guest for about 10 minutes, give them a breather, and then bring Jesse on. And he's got the hotline number, and so that's going on. Obviously, man, last night he was calling me saying, what do you think about this? And I had a guest on, Alfred at Dask. I saw it was Jesse calling, so I'm sitting there talking to him while Alfred's talking, and I'm like, well, because then it had been thrown out. Then I saw the judge just said it was the wrong venues. That's not. It's technically it's thrown out, but it's not really thrown out. So I don't know what Jesse's going to do, but it's a big deal because it's the fight against this national Gestapo force now rolling out on the streets. Before we get into all these issues of Iran, Occupy Wall Street, the New World Order, all the things that Jim wants to get into. Jim, what do you think of we already knew this was going on 13 years ago. It's in my film Police Day 2000 from 12 years ago, but I knew about it 13 years ago, saw the federal grants, street lights that have cameras and microphones hidden in them, power transformers that have them hidden in them, smart meters can actually, with an algorithm, tell what you're watching on TV. That was mainstream news yesterday. They're connecting to them 10,000 times a day. They're now putting switches in all the new appliances that data over power actually couples with and then tracks you in the house. I mean, this is beyond Orwell. TSA are now coming out on the streets. They've got PSAs running in hotels saying spy on everybody. They're now running video PSAs where it shows TSA at football games and at hotels. And just everyone being searched, line up everywhere, total prison. I mean, this is even crazier than I thought it would be, and moving so quickly, Jim. Do you think the globalists are doing this because they're scared? I mean, because I've never seen them move the timetable so fast.
Oh, absolutely. I think the New World Order is coming apart at the seams. But before we continue with that, let me just say, if Jesse Ventura comes in, I'll be more than happy to jump off and let's hear what he says, because I, for one, am quite grateful to his suit against the TSA because it's about time somebody does something. We had a great opportunity in Texas. A lot of your listeners may not know this or may not remember this, but the Texas House actually voted on a bill that would provide for prison term and a hefty fine for any TSA officer that touched your genitals, okay? And 30 of the 31 senators were all set to sign it, and even that New World Order stooge, Rick Perry, had indicated he would sign the bill. And then the Justice Department came in and said, oh, well, if the TSA can't guarantee flights in Texas, then we'll just cancel all flights in Texas. In other words, turn Texas into a no-fly zone, okay? And, of course, thanks to the lieutenant governor and the governor, they immediately caved to their New World Order bosses. But and so they withdrew the legislation. But what an opportunity. We should have said, yeah, go ahead and declare Texas a no-fly zone, and we'll just stop tax revenues here and not send them to Washington. We'll cut off your money supply. How do you like that? But, of course, they're weak-kneed and they're paid for. The solution, as you well know, Alex, would be to elect people at a local level, particularly the local county sheriff, who by tradition and by law is the highest law enforcement officer, in the land. And there are a bunch of courageous sheriffs, as you well know, taking part in trying to protect the freedom in this country. I know there was one up in, I want to say, Montana, who publicly stated that if any federal officials came in and violated the Constitution of the United States or the Constitution of the state, that his deputies would escort them to the border. And we need to have more like that, and we need to start standing up at the local level and just say no. But back to your thought, I'm in total agreement. I think they are scared to death. That's why they're tightening down, and it may be suicidal, Alex, because the more they tighten down, the more people wake up, and the more people bow their back and say, "No, wait a minute, stop that." And so it's an escalating type thing.
Jim, Where do you see all this going? I mean, you say you think the New World Order's in trouble. I think they are. I don't think they're invincible. I mean, they've got all their plans laid, but I mean, people are waking up to them. Why do you say the New World Order's in trouble?
Well, because as you yourself said, it's all escalating. It's all they're tightening down harder, faster, more openly. I mean, they've been in stealth mode for at least 100 years, moving with their New World Order, and now the gloves are off. I mean, look at what's happening with the economy. Look at what's happening with the European Union. The Greek Prime Minister. First he says, oh, well, we'll have a referendum, and then he says, no, we won't have a referendum, and then I think they finally said, no, we're not going to do that because he's in the pocket of the international bankers. But, and of course, the Prime Minister in England, he won't allow a referendum. So, wait a minute, people begin to wake up and say, well, wait a minute, if we're free people, why can't we vote on what we want to do? You know, for example, we see the same thing in this country. With all the economic problems we've had and with all the stuff that's going on with Wall Street, when has the public ever had a chance to vote on whether we wanted to have the TARP bailouts or whether we wanted to send $14 trillion over to prop up foreign banks? When do we get a chance to vote on this? It makes a mockery of the whole concept of democracy, doesn't it?
It does, and we even see MSNBC and Bloomberg and all these channels saying it's bad the Germans might not vote for this. We need to get rid of freedom. We need to get rid of their right to vote. I mean, it's just like open.
It is, and you know, when you start talking about the technical details and financial details of derivatives and things like that, most people, their eyes glaze over because we're just, you know, it's all we can do to just pay our light bills. But when you start talking about, do you get a chance to vote or not, that's pretty understandable, isn't it?
Well, it's just getting crazier and crazier and crazier. Let's start getting a little bit into Occupy Wall Street. I mean, it's coming out now that they basically called out a crowd. Well, many people showed up. The Soros folks tried to co-opt it. Now they admit Acorn's there, but it didn't work very well in my view.
Yeah, that's true. But the thing in New York is interesting, too, because that park that they're in has recently just gotten a big, the company that owns it has gotten a big grant from the Obama administration. And so, in other words, it's like, and of course, Obama himself is more or less sympathized with this, so we can see, wait a minute, what's happening here? Here are people protesting the establishment, and the leader of the establishment says, we're all for you. Doesn't that that should ring some bells with somebody? But again, this is a thing where you have to go back and understand who's really in charge, and who's really in charge are these people who inhabit these secret societies, like you yourself went out to Bohemian Grove, and you understand totally, and I think most of your listeners understand what I'm talking about. And, you know, this goes back, and of course, you know, one of their key mottos is order out of chaos. Well, to promote order out of chaos, first you have to create chaos, and that's what they're doing right now.
Jim, I want to take phone calls at the bottom of the hour, but when we come back, there's so many subjects I could raise, but what else is on your radar screen? What are you working on right now? We're going to go to break. Tell us about that on the other side. I'm not seeing bumper music from Genesis, but we'll...
That's all right. I'll cut off. We'll stop if we get the music. Here we go. We're going to be right back. Stay with us. Jim Marrs is our guest. We're into hour number 26 of Global Transmission. You can watch the free video streams and spread that out. That link to everybody to help spread the truth at Infowars.com. Freedom is safety. That's what it comes down to. Our domestication is just ongoing. But, you know, I don't understand the globalists. They're expert psychological warfare experts. That's been proven. But at the same time, they study populations, but they're pushing and pushing. It's getting the sheep more into line, but for large segments of the public, it's just enraging people and really getting them moving. But I guess that happens throughout history. But getting back to, I was asking you before the break, what's big on your radar screen, Jim? Well, this is November, after all, and I know that you and I have both had that long-standing interest in the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. So I've been going back and digging up through some of the details, some of the things that tend to get lost in the whole thing. As you'll recall, one of the big arguments they made was they said that Lee Harvey Oswald, who was accused of being the assassin, and I say accused because he never got a fair trial, never got a fair hearing, never was convicted of anything. In fact, the Warren Commission heard secret testimony, cherry-picking their evidence behind closed doors, refused to let anyone represent Oswald in a legal sense, and then came out and said, well, we think he did it and acted alone. Or as Gerald R. Ford always said over and over and over again, we could find no evidence of conspiracy. Well, no, they couldn't because they didn't allow anything that smacked of conspiracy in there. But one of the key things they used quite effectively was that Oswald was accused of shooting a Dallas policeman, J.D. Tippit, out in South Oak Cliff near the intersection of 10th and Patton. And the argument went, well, if he hadn't shot the president, then why did he shoot the cop? And so he shot the cop, so therefore he must have shot the president. Well, I think I could prove to any reasonable, open-minded person that Oswald did not shoot the cop. So now we can reverse the argument and say, well, he didn't shoot the cop. Maybe he didn't shoot the president. And the way I can prove he didn't shoot Officer Tippit is pretty simple. In years past, and in my book Crossfire, The Plot to Kill Kennedy, I pointed to three separate witnesses, an insurance salesman, a young boy who is now a Dallas evangelist, or was a few years ago, named Jack Davis, and Butch Burroughs, the assistant manager of the Texas Theater, all of whom told me that they encountered Lee Harvey Oswald, who was arrested in the Texas Theater about 1:30. No later than just a few minutes after 1, Officer Tippit was shot about 1:10 or 1:15 blocks away at 10th and Patton. So in other words, there are three separate witnesses who placed Oswald in the theater at the time Officer Tippit was shot. So obviously he can't be in two places at the same time. So he was not at 10th and Patton shooting the cop. Now, well, so why did they believe he did it? Well, there was another Dallas policeman named J.M. Poe, and Poe arrived at the scene of the Tippit shooting and was given some shell cases that witnesses had picked up off the ground that they said had been left behind by the killer of Officer Tippit. Officer Poe, being a good trained police officer, scratched his initials, JMP, in the brass shell cases, and there was the evidence. And yet, in the spring of 1964, when the Warren Commission called him up, showed him the shell cases, he could not find his initials on those shell cases. So in other words, the shell casings that they present to us today as the evidence, and they're still in the National Archives, and they say these are the shell cases from Lee Harvey Oswald's .38 caliber pistol that he used to kill Officer Tippit, are not the same shell cases that they found at the scene of the shooting. And I could further prove that because Oswald had a .38 special, which was it was a 38 Smith & Wesson .38 standard pistol, but it had been rechambered to accept .38 special ammunition. Now, the .38 special ammunition has a little bit longer than the normal shell bullet, but it holds more powder, so it has more power.
Finish up with that on the other side. But, I mean, look, you're getting into important minutia that proves this. But, I mean, I've talked to the Undertaker guy where they came in and put the ink on Oswald's hand and put the gun in it. I mean, it's just ridiculous, the whole thing. And now we have all these insiders going public.